The Boeing 777 cut through 37,000 feet of darkness over the Pacific, its cabin lights dimmed for the red-eye from Seoul to San Francisco. In Seat 2A, Major Thessaly Phoenix Corvin had finally surrendered to exhaustion, her head tilted against the window, auburn hair catching the occasional flash of navigation lights. The sleeping woman looked unremarkable: jeans, worn leather jacket, no visible military bearing. Just another passenger on just another flight. Colonel Marcus Webb moved through first class with practiced stealth, his dress blues exchanged for civilian clothes that couldn't quite hide his ramrod posture. He paused at row 2, studying the sleeping figure. 3 hours earlier, an encrypted message had reached him through channels so classified they didn't officially exist. Asset compromised. Package inbound. Find the fighter pilot. The woman's breathing was steady, but Webb noticed her right hand resting near the armrest's emergency oxygen mask, a muscle memory from ejection seat training. A thin scar traced her left temple, barely visible beneath carefully arranged hair. Her jacket had shifted, revealing the edge of a faded squadron patch sewn inside the lining. Webb leaned closer, his voice barely a whisper. "Major Corvin." Her eyes snapped open instantly, pupils dilating as they swept the cabin in a practiced threat assessment. No confusion, no grogginess, the response of someone who'd awakened to air raid sirens too many times to count. She found Webb's face, and her expression shifted from alertness to resignation. "Christ," she breathed. "I'm on vacation, Colonel, first one in 4 years." Webb slipped into the empty seat beside her, his voice urgent but controlled. "Vacation's over. We've got a situation that requires your particular expertise." "My expertise?" Thessaly's laugh held no humor. "Sir, my expertise got 37 people killed over the Strait of Hormuz. I'm flying a desk in Seoul now, remember. Processing transport requests and counting cargo manifests." "That's what your file says." Webb's eyes were granite. "But files lie, Major, especially when national security demands it." Through the window, the Pacific stretched endlessly below them, a black mirror reflecting nothing. Thessaly studied Webb's face in the dim cabin light, reading the tension in his jaw, the way his fingers drummed against his knee. Whatever was happening, it was big enough to pull her from administrative exile. "What kind of situation?" she asked. Webb glanced around the sleeping cabin, then pulled out a tablet covered in warning labels. The screen showed satellite imagery of mountainous terrain, timestamp reading 18 hours old. Red markers dotted the landscape like drops of blood. "The kind that doesn't officially exist," he said. "The kind that needs a pilot who's already dead." The Boeing 777 continued its journey through the night, carrying 2 passengers whose conversation would never appear in any official record, discussing a mission that would test everything Thessaly Corvin thought she knew about duty, sacrifice, and the price of being the best at something the world needed but could never acknowledge. Outside, the stars watched in silence as another secret war began to unfold 37,000 feet above the sleeping world. Thessaly stared at the satellite imagery, her trained eye immediately identifying the terrain features: jagged peaks, narrow valleys, sparse vegetation, the kind of landscape where helicopters went to die and fixed-wing aircraft became expensive craters. Red markers clustered around what appeared to be a compound built into the mountainside, its structures barely distinguishable from the surrounding rock. "Where is this?" she asked, though part of her already knew the answer would be somewhere officially non-existent. 43 kilometers northeast of a place that doesn't appear on any map," Webb replied. "Our assets on the ground went silent 72 hours ago. Satellite reconnaissance shows increased activity, but we can't get close enough for detailed intel. And you need someone to fly into that hornet's nest." Thessaly's finger traced the topographical lines on the screen. "Sir, with respect, half the Air Force could handle a reconnaissance mission. Why pull me out of exile for this?" Webb swiped to the next image, and Thessaly's blood turned to ice water. The compound's central courtyard showed debris scattered in a pattern she recognized, the twisted remains of an aircraft. Even from satellite altitude, the distinctive twin-boom configuration was unmistakable. "Is that a P-38?" she whispered. "P-38J Lightning, serial number 42103993, went missing over the Pacific in 1944 during a long-range reconnaissance mission. Pilot was Captain Eleanor Vance, Women Air Force Service Pilots Program." Thessaly felt her chest tighten. Every military aviator knew about the WASP, the forgotten women who'd ferried aircraft, trained male pilots, and died in service of a country that wouldn't officially acknowledge their contributions until decades later. Captain Vance had been a legend among those who knew the real history. "That's impossible. That aircraft has been missing for 80 years. 3 days ago, it wasn't missing anymore." Webb's voice carried the weight of classified certainty. "Our analysts believe the compound is some kind of collection facility. Aircraft, equipment, weapons, things that officially never existed or were lost to history. And now your ground team is missing too. 6 operators, best we have. They were supposed to provide reconnaissance for a larger operation, but their last transmission was a single word: Phoenix." The call sign hit Thessaly like a physical blow. Phoenix, the name that had followed her through 3 combat deployments, through commendations and court-martials, through the incident that had ended her flying career and begun her exile. Few people knew why she'd earned that particular designation. Fewer still knew the story behind it. "Colonel, my call sign isn't classified intelligence. It is when it's the only word our missing operators manage to transmit before going dark." Webb leaned closer, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Major, someone in that compound knows exactly who you are. They're specifically asking for you." Through the aircraft speakers, the pilot's voice crackled with routine professionalism. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our initial descent into San Francisco International. Local time is 0347. Weather is clear with light winds." But for Thessaly, time had stopped somewhere over the middle of the Pacific. She stared at the satellite image, at the ghostly outline of a P-38 Lightning that should have been nothing but rust and bones on some forgotten Pacific atoll. Someone had found Captain Eleanor Vance's aircraft, had somehow preserved it, had collected it like a trophy. And now they wanted Phoenix. The descent into San Francisco International gave Thessaly 27 minutes to process what Webb was asking of her. Through the oval window, the California coast materialized from the pre-dawn darkness, lights scattered like fallen stars across the Bay Area. Normal people were sleeping in those houses, dreaming normal dreams, untouched by the shadow wars that kept their world safe. "What's the mission profile?" she asked, though part of her was already calculating approach angles and escape routes. Webb pulled up a new screen showing aircraft specifications. "Lockheed Martin X-47C Unmanned Combat Air Vehicle, officially canceled in 2012. Unofficially, we have 3 operational prototypes." Thessaly studied the sleek, angular design. The X-47C looked like something from a science fiction film, a flying wing with no vertical surfaces, designed for stealth and autonomous operation. "I've never flown anything like this." Few people have. The aircraft was designed to be pilot-optional, but for this mission, we need human judgment. Someone who can adapt when the situation goes sideways. "And you think that's me?" "Major, your service record before the Strait of Hormuz incident was exemplary. 97 combat missions, 0 aircraft losses, multiple commendations for tactical innovation under pressure. The incident report may have ended your flying career, but it also demonstrated something more valuable than technical skill." Thessaly's jaw tightened. The Strait of Hormuz was a wound that had never properly healed, a moment when split-second decisions had cost lives and saved others in equal measure. "What's that, sir?" the willingness to make impossible choices when lives depend on it. The Boeing touched down with barely a bump, thrust reversers, engaging with a familiar roar that sent muscle memory singing through Thessaly's body. She'd always loved that moment of contact, when flight became ground operation, when the aircraft settled from its element into the mundane world of taxiways and gates. Timeline, she asked. Wheels up in 18 hours. Mission briefing at Travis Air Force Base in 6. Webb was already powering down the tablet, erasing the sensitive images from memory. Major, I need to know you're committed before we go any further. This isn't a standard military operation. Success or failure, your involvement will remain classified for the next 50 years. Thessaly watched ground crews marshaling the aircraft toward its gate, their orange vests bright against the pre-dawn tarmac. Somewhere in the mountains of a country that didn't officially exist, 6 operators were missing or dead. Someone had collected decades of lost military hardware like trophies, and they were specifically asking for a disgraced pilot whose call sign meant something she'd tried to forget. The WASP pilot, Captain Vance, what happened to her? Webb's expression softened slightly. According to the mission report, she disappeared during a reconnaissance flight over the Pacific. Weather was deteriorating, radio contact was lost, and no wreckage was ever found. She was 24 years old. Same age I was when I earned my call sign. I know. Outside, baggage handlers were unloading cargo with mechanical precision, each piece of luggage representing someone's journey from one life to another. Thessaly thought about her apartment in Seoul, the stack of unread novels on her nightstand, the vacation she'd planned to spend forgetting she'd ever been a pilot. But memory was a luxury she'd never been able to afford. The wheels of the Boeing 777 had barely stopped turning when Thessaly's phone buzzed with an encrypted message. Car waiting. Terminal B, Level 3. Gray Suburban, plates ending in 7349. Driver will identify with Phoenix authentication code. Webb had vanished into the crowd of deplaning passengers with practiced ease, leaving no trace he'd ever been aboard. Thessaly shouldered her carry-on and followed the flow of travelers through immigration, her mind already shifting into operational mode. The vacation was over before it had begun. The gray Suburban sat exactly where promised, engine running in the pre-dawn chill. The driver, a young sergeant in civilian clothes, lowered his window as she approached. Ma'am, authentication code Phoenix 77 Delta. Confirmed. Thessaly slid into the passenger seat, noting the driver's professional posture, the way his eyes swept the terminal approach with practiced vigilance. Travis Air Force Base. Yes, ma'am. Colonel Webb is already en route. He asked me to brief you on the security protocols. As they pulled away from the terminal, Thessaly caught her reflection in the side mirror. Tired eyes, tension lines that hadn't been there 5 years ago, the face of someone who'd seen too much and couldn't unsee any of it. She joined the Air Force to fly, stayed to serve, and discovered that service sometimes meant carrying secrets that ate away at you from the inside. Ma'am, for the duration of this operation, your cover identity is Dr. Sarah Chen, aerospace engineering consultant. Your legend includes advanced degrees from MIT and Caltech, specialization in autonomous flight systems. How much of that is true? The MIT degree, ma'am. Your master's thesis on adaptive flight control systems under extreme conditions was classified after publication. Thessaly had forgotten about that thesis, written during what felt like a lifetime ago when she'd still believed technology could solve the moral complexities of warfare. Young Lieutenant Corvin had been so certain that precision weapons and smart systems would make war cleaner, more surgical, before she'd learned that every surgical strike still cut deep. The Suburban merged onto Highway 101, heading north through landscape that looked deceptively peaceful in the early morning light. Hills rolled away toward the Pacific, dotted with housing developments where families were beginning their morning routines. Coffee brewing, children getting ready for school, the comfortable illusion that the world was fundamentally safe. Ma'am, Colonel Webb wanted me to ask about your current flight currency. 247 days since my last time in the cockpit. The number came automatically. She'd been counting. Simulator time only for the past 18 months, mostly transport aircraft, some fighter refresher training. And your medical status? Thessaly's hand unconsciously moved to her left shoulder, where shrapnel from the Strait of Hormuz incident had left permanent nerve damage. The doctors had cleared her for flight duty, but with restrictions that effectively ended her combat career. Cleared for flight with limitations. No sustained G-forces above 6, no inverted flight for more than 30 seconds. Roger, ma'am. The X-47C is designed for minimal pilot stress. Maximum operational G-load is 4.5. They crested a hill, and Travis Air Force Base spread out below them in the distance, runways stretching toward the horizon, aircraft arranged in neat rows, the organized chaos of military aviation. Thessaly felt her pulse quicken despite everything. Some part of her had never stopped being a pilot. The morning briefing room at Travis Air Force Base smelled of coffee, electronics, and the peculiar tension that preceded classified operations. Thessaly sat at a conference table surrounded by faces she didn't recognize, intelligence analysts, mission planners, technical specialists whose clearance levels probably exceeded her own. Colonel Webb stood at the head of the table, transformed from the civilian she'd met on the aircraft into the career officer who'd earned his position through 30 years of making difficult decisions. Behind him, a large monitor displayed the same satellite imagery she'd seen at 37,000 feet, now annotated with intelligence assessments and tactical overlays. Ladies and gentlemen, Operation Phoenix Gate is a reconnaissance and recovery mission targeting this facility. Webb indicated the compound with a laser pointer. Intelligence suggests the facility is operated by a non-state actor with access to significant resources and advanced technology. Major Janet Reyes, the intelligence briefer, stepped forward with a tablet full of classified assessments. The compound appears to be built around a natural cave system, heavily fortified and defended. Our best estimate is 30 to 40 personnel, military training, equipped with modern weapon systems. Thessaly studied the tactical overlay, nodding choke points, approach routes, defensive positions. What's the collection focused on? The satellite photos show significant infrastructure for what appears to be aircraft storage and maintenance. That's where it gets interesting. Reyes pulled up a new image showing the interior of what appeared to be a vast underground hangar. We've identified at least 17 aircraft of various types and eras. The P-38 Lightning is just the beginning. The images that followed made Thessaly's breath catch. A Lockheed SR-71 Blackbird that should have been in a museum. A Northrop YF-23 prototype that officially never existed. Aircraft from across 8 decades of military aviation, each one supposedly lost, destroyed, or canceled. Sir, this looks like someone's been collecting military aircraft, the way other people collect stamps. That's our assessment. But here's the critical point. Our missing ground team was tasked with locating and recovering classified technology that went missing from a transport convoy 6 months ago. Experimental avionics, advanced propulsion systems, next-generation materials. Webb changed the image to show a cross-section analysis of the compound. We believe this facility isn't just collecting historical aircraft. They're reverse engineering advanced technology, possibly for sale to hostile nations. Dr. Sarah Martinez, the technical briefer, opened a thick folder of specifications. Major Corvin, the X-47C you'll be flying incorporates some of the same technology our ground team was tracking. If this facility has access to those systems, They might be able to detect and engage the aircraft using its own countermeasures. So I'm flying into a trap that's specifically designed to catch me. That's a possibility we have to consider. Thessaly leaned back in her chair, processing the layers of complexity. Someone had been collecting lost military aircraft for decades. They'd somehow acquired advanced technology that shouldn't exist. They'd captured or killed 6 highly trained operators, and they'd specifically requested her presence using a call sign that represented the worst moment of her military career. Colonel, with respect, this sounds like a suicide mission disguised as reconnaissance. Webb's expression didn't change. Major, 6 American servicemen are missing in action. That technology cannot be allowed to fall into hostile hands. And frankly, you're the only pilot we have with the specific combination of skills this mission requires. What skills are those? The ability to fly experimental aircraft under extreme conditions, combat experience in denied environments, and most importantly, the proven ability to make decisions that prioritize mission success over personal survival. The room fell silent. Everyone present had read her classified file, knew about the Strait of Hormuz, understood exactly what Webb was referencing. Thessaly had made a choice that saved a convoy of refugees but cost the lives of her wingman and an entire helicopter crew. The kind of choice that haunted you forever but proved you could function when the mathematics of war demanded terrible calculations. Through the briefing room windows, she could see aircraft taking off from Travis's main runway, climbing into morning sky that looked deceptively peaceful. Normal training flights, routine operations, the day-to-day business of military aviation. But somewhere in the mountains of a country that didn't exist, 6 Americans were running out of time. The technical briefing on the X-47C lasted 3 hours and left Thessaly feeling like she was preparing to fly a spacecraft rather than an aircraft. The unmanned combat air vehicle represented a quantum leap in military aviation technology. A flying wing design with no vertical surfaces, powered by a single turbofan engine that produced minimal heat signature and virtually no acoustic footprint. Chief Master Sergeant Robert "Tank" Morrison, the X-47C program's senior technician, led her through the aircraft specifications with the enthusiasm of someone who'd spent his career working on machines that pushed the boundaries of what was possible. Ma'am, the X-47C is designed around the concept of adaptive autonomy. The aircraft can fly itself, make tactical decisions, even engage targets without human input. But it can also accept pilot override at any point in the mission profile. Thessaly studied the cockpit layout on her tablet. Instead of traditional flight controls, the X-47C used a neural interface system that translated pilot intentions into aircraft responses. How does the neural interface work? Think of it as advanced fly-by-wire, ma'am. Sensors monitor your eye movement, muscle tension, even brain wave patterns. The aircraft responds to what you're thinking as much as what you're doing with your hands. That sounds like a good way to crash when the pilot has a stray thought. Tank grinned. That's why we need a pilot with exceptional mental discipline, ma'am. Someone who can maintain focus under extreme stress. Dr. Martinez pulled up a schematic of the aircraft's sensor suite. The X-47C carries advanced synthetic aperture radar, electro-optical targeting systems, signals intelligence collectors, and experimental quantum communications equipment. It's designed to gather intelligence from environments too dangerous for human crews. What's the mission profile? Colonel Webb stepped forward with a classified mission folder. High-altitude ingress to the target area, descending to low level for detailed reconnaissance of the facility. Primary objectives are locating our missing personnel and identifying the technology being stored in the compound. And if I'm detected? The X-47C has advanced stealth characteristics, but if you're detected, evasion is your primary option. The aircraft carries no offensive weapons for this mission. Thessaly looked up from the specifications. Sir, if this facility has been collecting military aircraft for decades, they probably have surface-to-air missile systems. How am I supposed to evade modern SAMs in an experimental aircraft? Speed and stealth, ma'am. The X-47C can sustain Mach 1.6 at sea level while maintaining minimal radar cross-section. But frankly, evasion assumes detection, and detection probably means mission failure. The weight of the assignment was settling on Thessaly's shoulders like a familiar burden. She'd flown dangerous missions before, but never in an aircraft she'd never seen, using technology that existed at the intersection of science fiction and classified reality, and never with the knowledge that someone was specifically expecting her arrival. Colonel, about the transmission from our ground team. Phoenix could mean a lot of things. Webb's expression grew grave. Major, there's something else. The transmission wasn't voice communications. Our operators were using encrypted burst transmissions, single words chosen from a predetermined list. Phoenix wasn't on that list, meaning someone else transmitted it. Someone who knew your call sign and knew we'd be monitoring that frequency. The briefing room fell silent again. Outside, the business of Travis Air Force Base continued with mechanical precision, but inside this classified world, Thessaly was being asked to fly into a situation that felt increasingly like an elaborate trap. Sir, what makes you think I'll survive something that killed 6 special operations personnel? Webb pulled up one final image on the monitor, a personnel file photo of a young woman in a World War II-era flight suit, standing beside a P-38 Lightning. Captain Eleanor Vance, Women Air Force Service pilots, aged 24, reported missing over the Pacific Ocean in 1944. Because Major Corvin, sometimes the only way to escape a trap is to spring it deliberately. The X-47C sat in a heavily guarded hangar that felt more like a research laboratory than a traditional aircraft maintenance facility. Thessaly had seen experimental aircraft before, but nothing had prepared her for the sleek, alien geometry of the unmanned combat vehicle. It looked like something that had fallen from space, all smooth curves and angular surfaces, painted in a gray so dark it seemed to absorb light. Chief Master Sergeant Morrison ran his hand along the aircraft's leading edge with obvious affection. She's a beauty, ma'am. First flight was 18 months ago, and she's performed flawlessly through 37 test missions. How many of those missions were piloted? 12, ma'am. The neural interface system requires significant pilot training, so we've only had a few qualified test pilots check out in the aircraft. Thessaly walked around the X-47C, noting details that spoke to advanced engineering and unlimited funding. The engine intake was designed to minimize radar reflection. The landing gear retracted into housings that became part of the wing structure. Even the pilot access hatch was nearly invisible when closed. What's the pilot survival system like? Standard ejection seat, ma'am, but modified for the X-47C's flight envelope. The aircraft is designed to operate at altitudes up to 65,000 feet, so the life support system includes pressure suit interface and emergency oxygen for extended high-altitude flight. Dr. Martinez approached with a helmet that looked like something from a space program rather than military aviation. Major, this is the neural interface helmet. It monitors brain wave patterns, eye movement, muscle tension, and vital signs. The aircraft's flight control system integrates all that data to predict your intentions and respond accordingly. Thessaly took the helmet, surprised by its light weight. How long does it take to learn the system? That depends on the pilot, ma'am. Some of our test pilots adapted within hours. Others never achieved full integration with the aircraft systems. And if I don't adapt, then the mission becomes fully autonomous, and you become a passenger. Colonel Webb joined them beside the aircraft. his expression grim with the weight of classified knowledge. "Major, we've received additional intelligence about the facility. Our signals intelligence suggests the compound has been monitoring military communications for an extended period. They may know more about this operation than we'd prefer." "How much more?" "Potentially everything except your final approach, route, and timing." Thessaly stared at the X-47C, trying to process the implications. She was being asked to fly an experimental aircraft into a heavily defended facility run by people who collected military hardware and monitored classified communications. They'd specifically requested her presence and might know she was coming. The 6 missing operators had vanished without sending a distress signal, suggesting the facility had capabilities their intelligence didn't fully understand. "Sir, this is sounding more like a delivery than a rescue mission." Webb's silence was answer enough. In the complex mathematics of military operations, sometimes one life was considered an acceptable cost for recovering 6 others, or for preventing advanced technology from falling into hostile hands. Thessaly had made similar calculations herself, had lived with the consequences, and understood the logic even when she hated it. "When do we launch?" "Sunset. The X-47C's stealth characteristics are optimized for low-light conditions, and the target area will be in darkness during your reconnaissance window." Thessaly nodded, then looked back at the aircraft that would either carry her to the most important mission of her career or to her death in the mountains of a country that didn't officially exist. The X-47C waited in silence, its dark surfaces reflecting nothing, a machine built for wars that couldn't be fought openly. "Tank, I need 4 hours of simulator time before we launch." "Yes, ma'am. The simulator's already prepped and loaded with the mission profile." As the hangar team began their pre-flight preparations, Thessaly allowed herself one moment of doubt. Somewhere in those mountains, Captain Alina Vance's P-38 Lightning sat like a ghost from another war, proof that some missions echoed across decades. Tomorrow, her own aircraft might be sitting in that same compound, another trophy in someone's collection of military secrets. But tonight, she was still Phoenix, and Phoenix had always been best at rising from the ashes of impossible situations. The flight simulator felt like stepping inside a video game designed by someone with an unlimited budget and a comprehensive understanding of human psychology. Thessaly settled into the pilot's seat, which adjusted automatically to her body dimensions, then accepted the neural interface helmet from Chief Morrison. "Ma'am, the first few minutes can be disorienting. The aircraft's systems are designed to integrate with your nervous system, so you might experience some unusual sensations as the interface calibrates." The helmet's inner surface was lined with sensors that pressed gently against her skull, measuring everything from brain wave patterns to micro-expressions. As the system activated, Thessaly felt a strange tingling sensation, as if the aircraft were reaching into her mind and introducing itself. "Jesus," she breathed, "I can feel the aircraft systems." "That's normal, ma'am. The X-47C is designed to become an extension of the pilot's body rather than a separate machine. Think of an intention and the aircraft will respond." Thessaly thought about lifting off, and the simulated X-47C responded by spooling up its turbofan engine and beginning its takeoff roll. She hadn't touched any controls. The aircraft had simply read her intention and acted on it. "This is incredible." "Ma'am, now try thinking about your destination, while maintaining focus on basic flight operations." Thessaly visualized the satellite imagery of the mountain compound, while simultaneously managing the aircraft's climb to cruising altitude. The X-47C's navigation system immediately began calculating optimal routes, fuel consumption, and threat avoidance patterns, displaying options directly in her field of vision. Dr. Martinez's voice came through the simulator's intercom system. "Major, you're achieving integration faster than any pilot we've tested. The aircraft's artificial intelligence is adapting to your thought patterns in real time. For the next 3 hours, Thessaly flew simulated missions through increasingly complex scenarios: mountain flying in adverse weather, low-level reconnaissance runs through simulated surface-to-air missile engagement zones, emergency procedures for system failures at high altitude. Each scenario felt impossibly real, the neural interface making the simulated aircraft respond like a living thing. But it was the final scenario that made her blood run cold. "Ma'am, this is a simulation of the actual target facility, based on our best intelligence estimates." The simulated compound materialized around her as the X-47C descended through thick cloud cover toward the mountainous terrain. Even in the simulator, the facility looked formidable: defensive positions carved into solid rock, sophisticated radar installations, what appeared to be hardened aircraft shelters built into the mountainside. "Tank, those SAM sites look like S-400 systems." "That's our assessment, ma'am. Russian-made, but with modifications we haven't seen before." Thessaly guided the simulated aircraft through a low-level approach, using terrain masking to avoid radar detection. The X-47C's sensors were painting a detailed picture of the compound, identifying individual buildings, vehicle positions, even personnel movement patterns. Then the simulation threw her a curveball. Alarms began screaming in the cockpit as multiple surface-to-air missiles launched from concealed positions. The X-47C's defensive systems activated automatically, deploying chaff and flares while executing violent, evasive maneuvers that should have been impossible at such low altitude. "Simulators cheating," Thessaly muttered, fighting to maintain control as the aircraft twisted through a series of high-G turns that pushed the limits of both machine and pilot. "Ma'am, the simulation is based on worst-case threat assessments. If the facility has been collecting military hardware for decades, they might have weapons systems we haven't accounted for." Thessaly managed to escape the simulated missile engagement, but not before taking simulated damage to the X-47C's left wing and losing partial hydraulic power. The aircraft was still flyable, but its stealth characteristics had been compromised. How realistic was that scenario? Colonel Webb's voice came through the intercom with grim authority. "Major, that was actually one of our more optimistic projections." As Thessaly climbed out of the simulator, her flight suit was soaked with sweat despite the climate-controlled environment. The neural interface had made every simulated threat feel real, every evasive maneuver a genuine fight for survival. But it had also shown her something important about the X-47C's capabilities. The aircraft wasn't just advanced technology. It was a machine designed to think, to adapt, to survive in environments that would kill traditional aircraft and their pilots. In the right hands, it might be capable of accomplishing missions that conventional wisdom said were impossible. The question was whether her hands were the right ones. The pre-flight briefing began at 1800 hours in a conference room that had been cleared of everyone without need-to-know access. Thessaly sat across from Colonel Webb, Major Reyes, and Dr. Martinez, studying final intelligence updates and mission parameters while maintenance crews completed their work on the X-47C. Final weather report shows clear skies over the target area, winds from the northwest at 15 knots, visibility unlimited, Major Reyes announced. However, there's a cold front moving through the region that could bring cloud cover and precipitation within 12 hours of your arrival. "That's cutting it close for extraction," Thessaly observed. Colonel Webb pulled up a tactical timeline on his tablet. "Major, your mission window is narrow by design. Intelligence suggests the facility increases security during daylight hours, so your reconnaissance needs to be completed before dawn." "And our missing personnel?" "Still no contact. We have to assume they're either compromised or—" Webb didn't finish the sentence. In military planning, there were some possibilities that didn't need to be spoken aloud. Dr. Martinez leaned forward with a technical update that made Thessaly's stomach clench. Major, we've received some concerning intelligence about the facility's defensive capabilities. Signals intercepts suggest they have access to advanced radar systems, possibly incorporating technology from the missing convoy. Meaning they might be able to detect the X-47C despite its stealth characteristics. That's a possibility we can't rule out. Thessaly studied the satellite imagery one final time, memorizing terrain features and approach routes. The compound sat in a valley surrounded by peaks that rose to over 12,000 feet, accessible by only a handful of mountain roads that could be easily defended. It was the kind of location that would be nearly impossible to assault with conventional forces. Colonel, what's our extraction plan if things go sideways? The X-47C has sufficient range to reach international waters, where you'll be recovered by naval assets. But Major, if you're detected over the target, evasion becomes your primary concern. The aircraft carries emergency transponders that will activate automatically if you eject. And if the aircraft is captured intact? Webb's expression went cold. The X-47C carries thermite charges in critical systems. If capture is imminent, the aircraft will self-destruct rather than allow its technology to be compromised. The room fell silent. They were asking her to fly an experimental aircraft into hostile territory, gather intelligence on a facility that had already killed or captured 6 highly trained operators, and do it all in a machine that would destroy itself rather than be taken prisoner. Sir, one final question. Why me? Really? Half the test pilot community could handle this mission. Webb exchanged glances with Major Reyes before answering. Major, 3 days ago, our signal intelligence intercepted a transmission from the facility. Someone there specifically requested that Major Thessaly Corvin, call sign Phoenix, be assigned to any rescue or reconnaissance mission. They asked for me by name. By name and call sign. Someone in that compound knows exactly who you are. Through the conference room windows, the sun was setting over Travis Air Force Base, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that reminded Thessaly of other sunsets in other places where she'd prepared for missions that might not have brought her home. But this time felt different. This time, she was flying toward answers to questions she'd been carrying for years. 20 minutes later, she was walking toward the hangar where the X-47C waited in darkness, its alien silhouette barely visible against the shadows. Chief Morrison and his team were conducting final systems checks, their flashlights dancing across the aircraft's surface like fireflies. The moment had arrived. Phoenix was going home. The walk to the aircraft felt like a condemned prisoner's final march, each step carrying Thessaly deeper into a mission that logic said was impossible and intuition said was necessary. The hangar had been cleared except for essential personnel, creating an almost cathedral-like atmosphere around the X-47C. Chief Morrison approached with the neural interface helmet and a grim expression that spoke volumes about the mission ahead. "Ma'am, all systems are green. The aircraft's pre-flight diagnostics show optimal performance across all parameters." Thessaly accepted the helmet, then paused to study the faces of the technicians and support personnel around her. These people had spent months preparing for this moment, designing and testing systems that pushed the boundaries of military technology. Now their work would be tested in an environment where failure meant more than just disappointed project sponsors. Tank, what's your honest assessment of the X-47C's capabilities? Morrison's scarred hands moved across the aircraft's surface with obvious affection. "Ma'am, this machine is the most advanced aircraft I've ever worked on, but it's still experimental technology flying into an unknown threat environment. The aircraft will perform as designed, but design parameters don't.